I really wanted to provide something that would be different for the caregiver, that would kind of take them out of their daily routine and do something that would facilitate past reminiscence, that would facilitate them to be engaged. And, cooking is a really engaging activity. And that breaking up a recipe or even doing a little bit of a recipe is engagement in itself and can be so beneficial to the caregiver and the care recipient.
Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Mary Ann Shuko, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne-Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, OWL's author, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, I'm Jean Lee from All's Authors. All the resources we offer at allsauthors.com, including this podcast, are brought to you free of charge. Our management team is a dedicated group of passionate volunteers who earn no financial compensation. But to continue our mission to provide valuable resources to dementia caregivers, we need the support of listeners like you. If you'd like to support us, please make a donation at allsauthors.com/donate. We are a 501c3 organization. Remember, you are not alone.
Melissa Bernstein is an accomplished occupational therapist with a wealth of experience in various healthcare settings, such as long-term care, assisted living, and hospitals. With a passion for cooking since her teenage years, Melissa has become a certified chef who understands the importance of healthy eating for both the body and the brain. Together with her husband, Dr. David Bernstein, a geriatrician and author with 40 years of experience, they have created the Power of Five program, focusing on healthy eating and engagement for individuals with neurodegenerative disorders. In this episode, you will be able to discover their groundbreaking Power of Five formula for preventing neurodegenerative diseases, master the art of caregiving strategies for meal planning, leftovers, and utilizing online grocery shopping, and explore compassionate approaches to nutrition and engagement for Alzheimer's caregivers and their loved ones. Let's get started. Hi, Melissa and David. Welcome to the All's Authors podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. We're well. Thank you.
Yeah, we're doing great.
It's great to see you and to talk to you about all of your books, because you have many, and the Power of Five program that you created. But first, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we'll start with you, Melissa.
Okay. Well, I have a degree in occupational therapy as my background, and spent many years, treating patients, adults in long-term care as well as assisted living. And also had, I actually have done the whole gamut from zero to cradle to death, as they say. So, I have a very vast experience, and I've been very blessed with a great career, not only, in pediatrics and adults, but in all these venues and hospitals and long-term care, assisted living, school districts, et cetera. And management, I did a lot of management training as well. So, having my own business was a way for me to kind of do all kinds of creative things and work with and change the lives of a lot of people.
Great. I'm like you. I like to be creative too and to help people. So I'm like the creative nurse.
Yeah.
David, how about you? What can you tell us about your background?
Well, I don't want to neglect the fact that Melissa did online education as part of her career.
That's true.
And she's always been a great chef. And she's my personal chef now. Every night I have something different. I know she's going to talk more about that. I grew up as a typical young man, and I made a decision in high school that I wanted to be a doctor. And I was influenced by my grandparents, who got very poor care as they aged. And my mother had me promise that if I grew up to be a doctor, I would be better than what she experienced with her parents. In 1973, on the cover of National Geographic magazine, I saw a picture of a centenarian, and I said, I want to know more about that. And the commencement speaker in my high school was an author, and I said, I want to do that. I went to medical school, and I wrote an essay that I found as I retired that demonstrated my desire to teach what I learned and work on preventive care, and spent 40 years as a geriatrician and retired, and team up with my wife. And we talk about things that we know about aging and that I learned and that I wrote about. And I started writing in the final 15 years in practice and published some books and have been invited to have them on the OWLS Authors platform because of my interest in aging adults and what can make them age the best possible. And when it comes to dementia, what we can do to delay the onset or prevent it and have people be as safe as possible.
Okay, so you guys make a perfect pair.
Yeah.
We're a good pair.
We are a good pair, good balance.
Yeah, you have a lot to offer. And I wanted to talk first about Melissa and her beautiful cookbook, which is the first cookbook that we've had in our collection. And when I received it, just the way it's presented and the photographs and the recipes were just, made you want to start cooking right away. And for many caregivers, cooking is a big challenge. It's something we often have to do, whether we like it or not. And, we need to provide our families with quality, nutritious food at the same time being mindful of our budget. So eating out and takeout are not very good options considering all of that. So can you just share with us a little bit about what made you decide that you wanted to write this cookbook and then how it came about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have always enjoyed cooking, since I was young. I started probably when I was 14 or 15. And, I spent a lot of time taking care of my aunt who was sick. And my mom asked me to go over and, care for her a couple days a week. And so I would go over and I would help her with her activities of daily living, not realizing and not being an occupational therapist at that time, that those are the things that gave me enjoyment, is helping her do the things that she had difficulty doing because she was ill. And part of that was also her nourishment. So I would cook for her as well, even though she wasn't, as interested in eating at that point. But I think that was kind of the turning point for me of that I really wanted to be in a helping profession. And, started, with occupational therapy. And, I've continued cooking and I've become, a certified chef. And all of that kind of culminated into, the importance of food, and that food is so powerful. And food not only nurtures our body, but nurtures our brain. And the importance of healthy eating with someone with dementia or with any neurodegenerative disorder is extremely important. And as caregivers, we are kind of on this treadmill of doing all of these things on a daily basis, on a schedule. And I really wanted to provide something that would be different for the caregiver that would kind of take them out of their daily routine and do something that would facilitate past reminiscence, that would facilitate them to be engaged. And, cooking is a really engaging activity. And that breaking up a recipe or even doing a little bit of a recipe is engagement in itself and can be so beneficial to the caregiver and the care recipient. So helping with The Power of Five, David's book, The Power of Five, The Ultimate Formula for Longevity and Remaining Youthful, the second part of that book is putting healthy eating to practice. And that's really what facilitated or sprouted, if you will, my cooking and my really putting my cooking ideas into practice, and wanted to, I did a presentation for a group of caregivers, and I was giving so many materials out. I thought, I need to make this into a cookbook. There's nothing like it on the market. I can use my occupational therapy background in terms of breaking out, providing the needed information to safely bring someone into the kitchen. And that's really the important part here, is not only that you're doing an engagement and activity, but it's the safety and the understanding the level in which the care recipient can assist in a cooking activity. So in the cookbook, I provide several opportunities for them to engage with understanding what is their level. So there's an evaluation or a checklist, if you will, that they can do with their care recipient so that they know, can they grasp? Can they sit? Can they stand? And what is their standing and sitting tolerance? And how can they, what's their attendance like? What foods do they like? Prepare something that they like, not something that they don't like. And keeping in mind that you might have to break up an activity into small little bites because they may not be able to have the attention to do a full cooking activity in one setting. So I think, did I miss anything? I'm just trying to make sure I cover the bases here, but do you have another?
Well, one of the things that we talked about when you structured your recipes were those that were going to be beneficial to people
Sure.
with neurodegenerative disease.
Right. So, with the Power of Five formula, that cooking at the S in the sweets is really the realm of healthy cooking and eating. And so, it's beneficial for someone with neurodegenerative disorders to have, less sugar in their diet, less fat in their diet, and more protein and fruits and vegetables. And so our recipes are structured in that way that really balance, help to balance their diet.
Mm-hmm. So the recipes, are these recipes that you made for your family, and you included them in the book, or did you create them for the book?
These are recipes that I've been cooking, so that I did put them in the book. But I think the recipes are one part of it, but it's really the front matter and the information in the front and the back that really is the guide for the cookbook. It's kind of, the recipes are kind of, they're really kind of a sidebar because, there's lots of recipes out there and there's nothing really special other than we follow the formula, but it's really the process and it's the journey through the recipe, not necessarily what the recipe is, if you understand what I'm saying. It's how they do the recipe and how they approach the activity so that it's as engaging and it's as beneficial for both the caregiver and the care recipient. And I know it can be really daunting to bring someone into the kitchen. But I think if they go step by step and I put some guides in the cookbook so that they can just think through the steps that they need to do in order to safely bring someone into the kitchen. and have a successful outcome. And I also talk about, the other kinds of senses like music and dancing that can be included in your cooking activity if it's not too distracting, because sometimes it can be distracting to someone to have music going on in the background. But it also can stimulate memories of maybe their grandmother cooked a big Italian meal and had Italian music playing in the background, and that could facilitate conversation between the caregiver and the care recipient. So it's also a way for communication and to open up communication between the caregiver and the care recipient.
And if I could intervene,
Sure.
the part we collaborated on was my desire to see the use of music in that setting, because for your listeners and readers, the fact is that we imprint certain music in our brain at about the age of 20. So if you take a birth year like 1938 and add 20 to it, that would be 1958. So music from the late 50s, early 60s is a kind of music that would be imprinted on a person's brain. So if there's advanced dementia or moderate dementia, you can rekindle those feelings. You can rekindle their feeling about how they felt in their 20s by playing that music. So it's an important component to the fact that, you're cooking and it's a doldrum type of thing, but you can waken up the senses by playing that music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting. When my daughter was a baby, I used to, or, very young, I would play music when I would make dinner. That was my routine, and she would be with me. And, even to this day, she recognizes that music and associates it with that time about preparing meals.
Yeah.
She had commented on that. But there are just so many aspects to preparing a meal.
Yes.
You can break down and include your loved one in as far as like deciding what we're going to make, shopping and making sure you gather the ingredients, measuring everything out, the cooking part, setting the table, serving the food, and then the cleanup.
Yes.
It's just like, a lot of people do not even realize how many hours. It's like an hour or two in the kitchen every night going through this process. So it takes up a lot of our time, but it can be quality time even if that person just sits with you.
Yes.
While you're doing all of that. And when we were caring for my mother-in-law, who did not have dementia, but her vision was very poor, and she had stopped doing many things, especially cooking. She would have jobs. So if we had potatoes or carrots to peel, that was her job. And she would help set the table. And she had, those were her things. And she would make sure that she did them, and would, get upset if I tried to do her job, because it gave her a sense of purpose.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. The part about purpose is really important. And the part about the fact that how long is a day? 36 hours for some people. But 24 hours is a long time.
Right.
So to be able to carve an hour of extra activity for that person with degenerative disease and something to do with the caregiver or the care partner becomes really important. And that's one of the things Melissa and I collaborated on and talked about the importance of doing that.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, you're right about how many steps there are. In occupational therapy, one of the courses that we took was activity analysis, and it literally did take all of the activities of daily living, and we had to break those down and participate in those so that we could actually see the steps. And just actually yesterday when I was with my mom, I had her brush her teeth and wash her face, and the time it took to do that for her, she wanted to do it herself, and she did it herself. But I had to set her up, but she was able to do that, and had recall of how to do that, part of her ADL. And it took probably a half an hour for that. But she felt like she did something, for herself and her own self-care. So it was really important. When she was able to come to our house, which actually was about 6 to 7 months ago, when she could come and participate in meals, she also, like you did with your mother and mother-in-law, that she would actually have a job to do. She always wanted to do something to help, always. And I guess as caregivers, we can't forget that they had vital lives before all this. And they were engaged and participated and, managed households and jobs. And, that we sometimes forget that. And so the importance of cooking and meal prep and setting the table and that engagement on daily living skills is so important. That, and when I was in long-term care, I used to train the CNAs and trying to explain to them that it would make their job easier if they would allow the patient to do things for themselves, because they sometimes, or a lot of the times, facilitated dependence rather than independence. So it's the same thing as you progress with Alzheimer's, and it's the same thing as when I was in long-term care. You've got to foster independence, as much as that might be. It could be just a small amount, but it's so vital, because their lives are really important. It's the dignity aspect of, having dignity and doing something until they physically cannot anymore.
Well, that's a good point about fostering independence. Part of the problem, I think, with that is that people are slow. Then they're not acting as quickly as the caregiver would like, to get something done. But you need to have some patience. Exactly. Another activity great for people, with dementia is like to fold clothes or to fold towels and things like that, laundry. So they may not fold it the way that you want it, but it gives them something to do. And my mother-in-law, her mother had Alzheimer's, and what she would do is she would give her like a basket of towels and have her fold them. And then, a little while later, she'd take the whole basket of towels again and dump it in her lap and say, we need to fold the towels. And this would go on, throughout the day, but it made her feel like she was contributing to the household.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That's my job.
Can you think of any other tasks at the house that we could use to keep our loved one occupied and productive?
Let's see. I think they could maybe, depending on their hand strength or their dexterity, they could help put things away in a bookshelf. You could take some books down and say, could you organize these books for me? And they could put them back in the bookshelf. They could, if they have standing tolerance, they could actually sweep the floor. They could rearrange things in the kitchen. I mean, there's lots of tasks. I can't think of any others right at the moment, but there's lots of, tasks in the home that if the caregiver could just think about, could my care recipient do this? Give them part of the activity. Setting the table for dinner, even in the afternoon, they could set the table for evening.
There are all kinds of little tasks that I get to do around my house. So I'm thinking of mine, like, put the dishes in the dishwasher, empty the dishwasher. We have a hardwood floor in the kitchen, so there's a little dustpan that I can sweep up the crumbs and vacuum the family room. I think the point that you raised is a really good one. Yes, it's about cooking, and that's what Melissa wrote about, but there are other tasks that would make the person with neurodegenerative disease and dementia feel useful and contributing.
Helping to make the bed in the morning, helping to change the sheets, anything that they could assist with. Whether it's just putting a pillowcase on a pillow. I mean, whoops, my mic just disappeared here. So any type of activity that they're doing through the day, offer to have them help you to do that. And it does take patience. It really does take patience. And that's, caregivers have a lot of patience. They just have to have a little extra patience when they're in the kitchen.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Power of 5 formula? I know that that's something that you came up with to help people with the aging process.
Sure, I'd love to. It's my favorite thing to talk about. When I was practicing medicine, I saw the same 3 major health problems most every day. They were the things that people suffer with as chronic diseases late in life. And that's neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease, cardiac diseases like heart attacks and strokes, and cancer. I endeavored to figure out what was the link between all of them. Because if you sit down with an older adult, one of their greatest fears is, I don't want to get dementia. What can I do to prevent that? And those three things all have one thing in common, and that's inflammation, chronic inflammation in our body. And then I set out to figure out what were the things that created that chronic inflammation, and what could people do to reverse or reduce their risk. I avoid talking about prevention because I don't think we really know how to prevent various things, but we can delay the onset. And that would be key if we're talking to families about neurodegenerative diseases, what they can do to prevent if they think it's genetic in their family, or what they can do to reduce some of the burden in people with dementia. So there were 5 things in my Power of 5 formula. And they all begin with the letter S. I limit things to 5 because people can remember 5 items. They can stay connected with that. And then this time, I made them all begin with the letter S. So it's avoid sweets, avoid stress, get more sleep, sweat, and sex or socialization. So if I could talk about each one individually, sweets, sugar, carbohydrates, it causes an inflammatory effect in our body. And by doing that, puts it at risk for vascular disease, which may be one of the reasons why we get dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but also causes inflammation in our brain. So sugar has often been thought of, or diabetes and high blood sugars and dementia have all been linked as maybe type 3 diabetes. But reducing sugar, and that's why Melissa incorporated it in her recipes, was an important component. And stress. Stress releases cortisol and other neurochemicals in our body, and is another contributor to that inflammatory reaction in our body. So avoiding stress, getting more sleep. We as a society have not valued sleep as much as we need to. And not a week goes by when I don't read an article about the impact sleep has on our brains and the development of dementia. So it's important that people understand that though they may have had jobs that reduced or inhibited their sleep, or they have a sleep disorder like insomnia or sleep apnea, that it's important to get them treated, because that's another contributor that ages our brain. And then there's sweat. That's my euphemism for exercise. So we know that 30 to 90 minutes a day is sort of the sweet spots of what we need to do to get physical activity to reduce our risk for inflammation and our risk for the 3 diseases I mentioned, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and heart disease. And it's pretty well established that if you exercise, you'll reduce your risk of heart disease. But we're now finding that exercise and the opposite of that is avoid being a couch potato. That reduces our risk for dementia. And people may not know this, but exercise reduces the risk of cancer recurrence by 35%. So that someone getting treated for breast cancer, for example, maybe getting chemotherapy that has an impact, and then they can further impact that by exercising by another 35%. So exercise is incredibly important. And the 5th, because Melissa and I and you are in the baby boom generation, and the caregivers of patients who are caregivers for Alzheimer's disease are baby boomers. Baby boomers, we grew up in the sex generation. So I included sex as a thing to get people's attention. And sex is about intimacy, but it's about socialization and connections. And the opposite of intimacy is loneliness. And we recognize that as a health hazard, not only as a health hazard for young people who are now addicted to their mobile phones and their smartphones and spend too much time on that during the day and puts them at risk for depression and anxiety and distraction. But in everyday society, loneliness is this health hazard. And maybe worse among caregivers and those with dementia, because we retract we retract from interactions from other people when we either have dementia or when we're caregivers, and we don't share what we're going through, which is a big part of what we're all about when we're talking to family and caregivers. So we now know that loneliness is this health hazard. And I talk to groups about how we put all 5 aspects of the power of 5 together. But in particular, when it comes to loneliness, we talk about what we can do to reduce that threat. And it requires action. It requires an intention about getting together, and in this case, going to support groups, because support groups would be really helpful for people with Alzheimer's disease and for the caregivers in particular. But also joining clubs, setting dates to be with friends, because it's not going to happen just out of the blue. We need to be very attentive to it. And as a society and as a group, we're not really good at it. And I take responsibility for myself that I wasn't good at it. I worked many hours a day, 12, 14 hours a day, it seemed. And during the workday, I saw 18 of my friends. They made an appointment to see me, and they were called patients. So I had my social time with them, but the connections outside my office weren't quite the same. And now that I'm retired, I've really endeavored to make friends. Melissa is a great connector, and she has lots of friends, and I emulate her. But I've gone out on the skinny branches of talking to people and saying, let's get together for lunch or coffee, or connect with people by Zoom, old high school classmates, college classmates, and medical school friends that I now connect with, because as I tell them, it's important for both of our health to do that. And I don't think we understand that in this day and age. And I think that's one of the focal points of the things I talk about now.
Okay. So both of your books are available on Amazon and the usual places. Is that right?
Yes.
And
also our website.
Authors Bookstore.
Yes.
And on your website.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where people can find them. And you have one other book, David, that you wrote that was featured in All's Authors, and that was a book about driving dilemma.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. My senior driving dilemma was the book that I'll hold up a little longer, but my senior driving dilemma was the book that got me involved with Al's Authors, and thank you very much for including it in your library. And when I first had the inkling about writing a book, the original thought was that I needed to make an impact on drivers and older drivers, senior drivers, making a decision that now is the time to stop driving. It's an incredible, emotion-filled event in the lives of older drivers, particularly talking to the generation who need to be relinquishing their licenses now. They grew up where they didn't have to take away licenses from their parents because their parents died when they were 60, 65. They didn't live until they were 80 and still driving. So this generation now is facing, I'm 85. It's the only source of my independence. I'm not giving it up. I can't turn my neck. I can't see, but I'm still going to drive. And I have a cognitive decline, and I don't know where I'm going all the time. And I would see that in my practice and wrestle with the subject. And so in my very first book, I've got some good news and some bad news. Your old Tales of a Geriatrician, get that plug in. I wrote a chapter about it, and the name of the chapter was, quote, "But doctor, I'm a good driver," end quote, because that's what my patients would tell me. And they realistically thought they were good drivers, and they were terrible. and I was, one of the things I loved about being a geriatrician is that it's like being a detective, because my patients didn't always tell me what was going on. I had to figure it out from lab work, from friends and family, and I would protect their anonymity and their source of information. So I would know that someone was a bad driver when they came in by little tips that I had. And I had to coax out of them the fact that they ought to avoid driving. And if that didn't work, I had some other tips about families sending their family and loved ones for a driver test, or there's a program in many hospitals called Drive Able, and get them tested and make an agreement that, if you don't pass this test, we'll agree that you'll relinquish your license. And so that was one of the tips. And, I'd also say, to family members, beg, borrow, and steal, whatever it takes to get your loved one off the road. And one of the things that occurred to me really later, even probably after I wrote the book, is the financial costs of causing an accident and injuring someone. And that people in all of our generations love to save money and leave it to family members as when they pass. And you can lose your entire inheritance, your entire legacy in causing an accident and hurting someone. Your legacy, your personal legacy, if you hurt someone, but also your financial legacy in terms of the cost of covering the accident and the injury. So it prompted me to write my smaller book, The Senior Driving Dilemma, where I put together some of those tidbits and information. So it's a pleasure to participate with Al's authors and be in the library and be in the library with books such as Melissa's and have an interview with you and talk to you about those wonderful things.
Oh, thank you so much. And we're really glad to have them. And we'll be adding the Power of Five book and the other one, Good News.
I've got some good
news and some bad news. We'll have to plop those into the bookstore as well. That'd be great.
But
so,
if I could just introduce Melissa's one other thing, if I may. Melissa mentioned that her book sprouted from my Power of Five formula, but that propelled her to write her larger cookbook. And we can introduce Melissa's larger cookbook because it has recipes that conform to my Power of Five formula, which I'll let her explain, but mostly Mediterranean lifestyle and plant-based, a whole food plant-based. And that Melissa was able to compile recipes that I endorse because they're brain healthy and heart healthy.
And he ate them all.
I ate them all.
Okay.
I am so fortunate.
So it's called the Power 5 Test Kitchen, your guide to healthy cooking and eating. So it has a few of the same recipes very few of the same recipes that are in the Caregiver, because that cookbook that's behind me there it is. That book was started before this Caregiver cookbook. And then I stopped what I was doing and did the Caregiver cookbook and then came back to finish this cookbook. And we just launched in March 1st. We just launched. So I'm happy to say I am a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So that is excited. So it's you can also read more about it on our website, which is powerof5life.com. And I'm very excited about it because it does help people understand about eating and gives them resources about healthy cooking and eating. So it's kind of a combination. So it's really for anybody who enjoys eating, and maybe someone who doesn't enjoy cooking may want to start enjoying cooking and getting some tips on cooking. And my recipes are not complicated. There's maybe one or two that are complicated, but it just takes a long time, but they're not difficult. But and there's even a special chapter in the back about healthy eating for your dog and your pets. So I've developed dog treat recipes because I have, how many do we have? 4 or 5 furry grandsons. So because we have those, all my children said, you have to develop some recipes for our dogs. So I included a chapter in the back about feeding your animals. So there's a little introduction to every chapter.
And so when we talked about you including recipes for furry grandchildren, it was for multiple reasons. That a lot of people have dogs.
Right.
And Melissa wanted to incorporate something to entice people to buy her book so that they can have recipes for their dog, but also have a cookbook on their bookshelf with healthy eating and recipes for them.
Sure.
As the beneficiary of Melissa's cooking, what I can tell you are, I'm bound to tell you that the recipes are delicious, but Melissa makes these big dishes worth so that there's always leftovers. So for caregivers who are thinking about making a meal and saying, well, this is a lot of work, there's a lot of work, but you get 3 or 4 meals out of that and maybe more, and you can freeze them, especially if it's a just two people living in a home, but you can have meals for today, meals for tomorrow, freeze it, and meals for next week. And for people living the crazy, hectic lifestyle of caring for a loved one with neurodegenerative disease, dementia, then you always have a spare if it's a hectic day and things get out of control.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all very good points. And I mean, I subscribe to all of them. I always cook extra, and I love leftovers, and I love to freeze because, you know, you come home from work and it's like, what am I having for dinner? And you open the freezer and you've got something great, like a big lasagna or something.
Yeah.
The chili or whatever, and just pull that out, and it just solves all of your problems.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Meal planning is also really important for the caregiver.
Yes.
So, you know, on a Sunday night, you know, plan the meals for the week. Some that you can make on Sunday, some that you can say, okay, this is a recipe that I want to cook with you to, you know, on Wednesdays, and just maybe one recipe a week do with your care recipient, and just have one activity. If it goes well, you can do more. But, you know, try at least one simple recipe, just something very simple to start with, and see how it goes. And then you can kind of add from there.
All right. That sounds wonderful. Where can people find you on social media?
They can find us on Instagram. It's Power of Five Test Kitchen is my handle, if you will. They can find us on Facebook, powerof5life.com. Again, that's the number 5. They can find us on our YouTube channel, which is the powerof5life.com. So we're on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Of course, that's a little bit different, but we also are on LinkedIn. Both of us are on LinkedIn and Power of 5 Life.
And our website, powerof5life.com. We offer some small recipe books that Melissa wrote that are available for free.
So they can sign up and get a free recipe book. And
my tips, notes on living longer is another free giveaway that we have there. And I'm posting blogs. This month I've posted blogs about mental health and stress, and the importance of recognizing where mobile phones and smartphones are affecting our mental health. So people can read about that. It's really important. And if I can chime in on just one other thing we talked about that meal planning, since millennials and baby boomers are part of your audience, one of the things that I've learned to do is do some of our grocery shopping online. So for those baby boomers who have the potential to use the internet and can't get out of the house as much, and it's very difficult to find the time to do that, ordering groceries online is something that can be really a game changer and really help when they can't get out of the house. Yeah. So that's something to add to people's toolkits. And you know, the whole Al's author thing is all about creating a bookshelf, but also toolkits to help people get through these difficult times. So that's one more piece for a toolkit that can be really helpful. They
can also sign up to get recipes to come right to their mailbox. So I post a couple recipes plus some blogs a month. So if they want to get my recipes directly into their mailbox, they can sign up for that. And they can also search for recipes in my library of recipes that are right on our website. They just have to look for my name, and that's my name, and drop down menu, and they can search for a recipe that they might want to make.
All right. That sounds wonderful. And I'm going to put links to all of these sites and to the website in the show notes, so the listeners can look at the show notes, and you can acquire all of these wonderful gifts that you have put together for them. That's great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an All's Authors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on All's Authors, please visit allsauthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to allsauthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony.